all of this year has just been one big blur. One thing, you think you're getting a handle on something and it changes. You think that you're figuring life out and you're figuring out new normals and all that, and then it changes. But I want us to kind of find peace today, not just kind of, but I want us to find peace today in the understanding that Jesus came from heaven to this earth in a time that was pretty difficult. And Jesus understands how to make our home a place that can be ruled by peace and be ruled by surrender in our life, that he can control the outcome of everything that is to be. And I think of the story, and I want to think of the story, I see the story and read the story, and I see it in a different way whenever I look at the fact of what happened in the life of Mary for the birth of Jesus. And I know there's no better time to celebrate the fact that Jesus came than right now, to be just ruled by that peace. So let's read together in verse 26. Here's what it says. It says, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a virgin named Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. And Gabriel appeared to her and said, greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you. Confused and disturbed, Mary tried to think what the angel could mean. You know, when someone is confused and disturbed, doesn't necessarily mean that what is happening isn't from the Lord. You can always ask these questions. Why is this happening? Can I tell you that God is big enough to handle your why? God is not threatened when you ask him why. Maybe it's just a good thing that you're talking to God about it at all. You're talking to the one that can do something about it. You can ask why. You can even feel on the inside and just wish him things were different. Want him to fix it. Or you're just trying to figure it out. When you are confused and disturbed, you can become distracted from what God ultimately is doing. She's trying to think, what could the angel mean? The angel responds in verse 30, don't be afraid, Mary. The angel told her, for you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be very great and will be called Son of the Most High. In verse 34, Mary asked the angel, but how can this happen? You. So the baby to be born will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God. And Mary responded, I am the Lord's servant. May everything you have said about me come true. I love the way the English Standard Version says it. In verse 38, it says, then Mary said, behold, the maidservant of the Lord, let it be to me according to your word. I love that phrase, let it be. Because in our society, it teaches us a lesson that we are taught to want to control everything. You may even say this morning, look, I'm not controlling. I'm just aggressively involved. Or I'm aggressively helpful. Hey, don't you want to fold that up and put it up? Okay. We want things done the way we want it. And when it doesn't happen the way we want it, we get very disturbed and confused. Because things don't happen the way we think they should happen. We influence to the very best of our ability. We would say influence, aggressively influence, but sometimes we want to control everything. Think about this, parents, what we do with our kids. And I don't think there's anything wrong with this, by the way. We pick out what they wear. I want April to pick out what I wear most of the time. Want to control, the way you fix your hair, or what they make on a test, or what they're going to major in and who they're going to marry. And as a parent, I'm kind of vested in this. I want them to marry well. Comes to marriage, we kind of want to control on a little different level. Where to go, how to drive, what not to say when you're preaching. When it comes to control, we even pray and spiritualize control. Big life events. But we do it like this. God, you know what I want. What I want, when I want, and where I want it. We want to control these things. We want to control image. What people think. The life we want them to see. Of course, the filtered, edited, 23 attempt version. The perfect family photo. That is a smiling photo. That a great fight happened while it was going on. I thought it'd be good to get a video of photographers and let them do interviews on what family photo sessions really look like before they're edited. Now, I'm not saying they're not smiling, but trying to get a family to do anything together and be happy about it can be a little bit challenging. I think we have lost the art of being spontaneous when it comes to pictures. My family will come up, mainly my wife and my daughter. They'll come and say, hey, let's take a picture. Okay. I got one smile. Okay. I got it whenever April and I got married, I got one smile. They're like, are you really smiling? Like, I don't know. It's all I got when it comes to taking pictures. This is all I have. And I practiced it because I wanted it to make it look, because I realized because I do have a bigger head that my eyes close when I smile. And so, but I don't want to be like, in a weird way. So I know that that's creepy looking and I don't want that on the shelf forever. And so I got one smile. They'll come, and I'll think it's a really good smile. I'll even try and trick myself into something funny in my mind. I'll tell myself a joke right before we take the picture and I'll think I'm really smiling. And they're like, oh, let's take another one. Like, I ain't got that many jokes. And then we post it, #blessed. April made a post last year about we were getting ready to go on a date night and we took these pictures over. She's like, oh, let's take another. Oh, the light was wrong on the wall. Oh, there's a shadow. And I'm like, hey, can we just take a picture? And so she put this storyline up from the way it started to me like looking at her like, really? She's like, and this is how our date night photos went. Because I'm just like, hey, let's just take the picture. It is what it is. That's why I miss the Polaroids that are coming back. You just come by and there it is, and you stuck with it. And then we #bless it. So good. So great. Happy family moments. Pictures are awesome. Here's what I know, that the more we try to control, the more afraid we become of losing control. And the more we're afraid, the more we try to control. And the desire, I want you to understand this, I want you to hear me this morning. The desire to control is defined by our trust in who we trust and what we trust. Our desire to control. Think about it when it comes to economy. Well, I better start making, yes, you better be wise. You better do. But when you trust in the Lord with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind, and you lean not on your own understanding, you understand this, that control is not something that you are in charge of. It's not something that I'm in charge of. Yes, we're responsible. Yes, we may try to make the very best decisions that we can. We do feel like we are supposed to do the right thing. I'm not saying that we're just supposed to walk around aimlessly. Yes, we are appointed. We are living in form and function of what God's called us to do. But so was Mary. Mary didn't do anything wrong for her life to get turned upside down. She was found with favor. I'm sure that if she was controlling everything, this is not the way that she would have planned it. See, when you overestimate your ability to control, you underestimate the power of what God is wanting to do. What I see in Mary's life is that we may not have the power to control, but we do have the power to surrender. We read the story and think, oh, with Mary, it's got to be easy. She's going to be the mother of Jesus. She was just a teenage girl that I'm sure had hopes and dreams, also fears and pressure like any other girl in her day. And yes, I realize that culture was extremely different then than it is now. But there was still culture. There was still expectation. There were still things that she wanted to see happen. And I promise you, telling her fiance that she was pregnant and it wasn't his was not on the top of the list. But we know the end of the story, so we're like, oh, this is great. Mary, I'm sure, had the pressure to marry well because it had been decided for them and they are together. Her choices are possibly limited, not like many people's today. There was no .com place to meet or a way to connect, or they didn't just see each other at Walmart. Her standards, I'm sure that Joseph met the standards of what she was hoping for, a dependable, a strong, loving man, an honorable man. And we know that Joseph is because when you read on in the story, you know that he was surrendered to God and ultimately answered in obedience to what God had for him. It's in nature to control, to want to control those things. In today's standards, ladies have a few expectations when it comes to a man. Not many, just the important things. They want him to be strong and handsome and charming. They want him to have a great car and a good job and a bright future. Strong hands and a soft heart. Want him to be close to mama, but not a mama's boy. Bold but humble. Fit but not obsessed. Taking shirtless selfies all the time. Decisive but flexible. To have big goals and be driven, but be easygoing. To be well groomed, but not soft. They want them to be secure, but also dangerous. They want them to provide a great future. They want them to lead, but not dominate. Be confident, but caring. They want them to love old movies, walks on the beach. Chocolate covered strawberries. I mean, if you really think about all of the ideas that we have about what we want and how we want it and when we want it and all of the requests that we have, then you always end it with the most of all. Want them to love God and be a spiritual leader and a good father. And I think that those are important. It's not much to expect, right? It's just the normal stuff. Because Joseph is Mary's Mr. Right, and it's going to be great. And an angel appears and says, hey, you're going to be pregnant. It's not what she wanted. It's not what she expected. It's quite the opposite. And Mary has to make a choice between her plans and God's purpose. She has to make a choice between her dreams and God's destiny. She has to make a choice between her desire for control and God's calling on her life. And even though she doesn't understand the plan, she makes a choice to trust that God had a purpose. Like, Pastor, what are you saying to us today? Through the story of the announcement of the birth of Jesus. We're in this home for Christmas type thing, a series. Jesus taking his rightful place in our house, in our hearts, with all of the opinions that we are privileged to be able to have. And I don't know that we need more control. I know that we need more surrender. When I look at the story of Mary, I don't see a life that whenever the opportunity was given to her, that she made the wrong choice. She made the right choice. And I see life as the accumulation of opportunities that we have to make the choice whether we're going to let go and let God, or we're going to be in control and do what we want to do and then spiritualize it with lingo and try to say God's blessing it. I find that a lot of times in our life, we do what we want and ask God to bless it instead of getting a part of what God is blessing and just being obedient. We want to do everything the way we want to do it. And if it's not the way we want it, we'll leave and we'll go do it the way we want it done. And then whenever that's no longer what we want, we'll leave that and we'll go do something else. And then see, I think that the ability that we have to control is also dangerous, the freedom that we've been given. But the freedom that we've been given when it's surrendered to the hands of God can bring a destiny that is life-changing, not just for you, but for all of your family. And I want Jesus to be in my home for Christmas. I want him to be in my heart for Christmas. I know that this is the right time for us to celebrate Christmas, even if the weather isn't cooperating. Because to me, Christmas isn't about weather. It's not about gifts. It's not about any of the commercialized things. And yes, they're fun and they're eventful and whatever. I'm not against them, but I'm against them being the thing that we worship the most. We better get this right. Yes, there are family traditions that are probably incredible. But is your family legacy going to be marked by your ability to control the outcome or your ability to let God control the outcome? You're like, well, Pastor, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to give you some takeaways today. And the first one is this. It's in the verbiage found whenever Mary ends with that passage. And she says, let it be unto me. And I think in life we have to kind of approach it this way. It's the let me be versus the let it be. She said, let it be done unto me. And so I ask you the question, what are you trying to control that's outside your control today? Where is the need for surrender in your life? Is it in relationship? Is it the fear of the unknown of what tomorrow holds or the next season? Is it trying to present an image that looks so good, but behind the scenes, you know it's all falling apart, but you'd rather everybody else be confident in what they see because you can control the way they perceive you. But you don't care who's on the inside that knows it's really falling apart. Is it the pursuit of perfection? And I see so much happening when it comes to the future of our kids. Let me just help you a little bit this morning. Your kids need to learn what it means to hurt and to fail. They need to understand what it's like to not get picked. They need to understand what it's like to not get played. They need to understand that life's not fair. And if you teach them that everything's going to work out to their favor every time from people, then guess what's going to happen? They're never going to be satisfied and fulfilled because they're going to think that this world creates to serve them. It came out a little harder than I thought it was going to. So look, here's the thing. It doesn't make me feel good when my kids' hearts are broken. But I can tell you what it teaches them is a life lesson. And if I protect them from ever having their heart broken, then guess what they're not going to learn? The most important lessons ever learned in life. Mary, she had the decision to make. She could have had the clenched fist. God, this isn't the way I wanted it. This isn't what I had planned. But instead, she didn't have a clenched fist shaking at the face of God, at the angel who gave the message. Instead, it was, let it be. Let it be unto me. There's a big difference between let me be and let it be. See, the thing about surrender is there's no partial surrender. You can't be 87% surrendered to Jesus and 100% obedient. There's a difference between partial obedience and whole obedience. And delayed obedience is still no obedience. What if Mary had said, hey, sounds great. I don't know how I'm going to figure this out. Give me a couple weeks to pray about it. Do you know most of the time when we say, let me pray about it, we've already made up our minds and we're just going to use spiritual lingo to say no to the things we don't want to do? Because if it doesn't make us happy, we don't want to do it. And if it's inconvenient, we're not going to go through with it. Because we sit on the throne of our own lives and we use God as an excuse to justify the selfishness in which we lead it. Save my soul, Jesus, but I'm going to control everything else. Our desire to control is rooted in a lack of faith. Think about it this way. If you had a bag full of $10,000 today, you're not going to give it to someone you don't know and say, hey, watch this for me. Because you're only going to trust what's important to you with someone you know that is trustworthy. This is what happens when it comes to things like being faithful in giving, tithing. Now, I've been pastor here 8 years. You don't hear me say much about it. And the reason I can say something about it today is because you understand my heart. Your giving is a true definition of who and what you trust. And I've found that to be true in my own life. I remember going through a very big financial crisis and wondering what it was going to look like, and I had decisions to make. But the way you give defines the way you trust. The way you're obedient in giving defines who you trust. There'll come a day that when you tithe, it won't be for a write-off. It'll be because you're going to be biblical and obedient. It won't be because the government gives you a kickback. We have a desire to control rooted in a lack of faith, but the truth is when we overestimate our ability to control, we underestimate the power of our God. The second thing I want you to see is to know this, that we don't have the power to control, but we always have the power to surrender. Everything in culture invites us to live contrary to the gospel. Everything in our culture says you take charge, you control your destiny, you make it happen. And are there some truths that you need to be working, you need to be faithful? Yes, but you're not doing them so you can have control, you're doing them because you're surrendered. There's a difference. You're not working to be saved, you're working because you are saved. Culture wants us to be in control, wants us to, oh, you want something, you go grab it. You just make it happen. And the problem is we're making the gospel a very self-serving thing. But the gospel of Jesus Christ is not birthed out of convenience. It's birthed out of surrender. The surrender of a little teenage girl that said, let it be unto me. I have the sneaky suspicion that if the American church had the choice, they say, Lord, let it be unto me as long as it doesn't cost me much. As long as it's not inconvenient. As long as it doesn't take up too much of my time. Because I'm busy doing everything else I want to do. We don't have the power to control, but we have the power to surrender, because when you get to the end of your life and you realize that you missed some really big God moments, then what? You have this regret, and the enemy wants to make you feel shame and guilt, which brings no fruit. Whenever Jesus said, if you want to follow me, then pick up your cross. Paul said, if you want to find your life, you'll lose it. And to follow Jesus is to surrender control. Surrender isn't a one-time event, it's a daily choice. Imagine Mary all through life. Let it be unto me. Then guess what happened? She had to get on the run, pregnant. Gives birth to Jesus. They want him killed. There's a decree put out. Basically go into hiding. They leave town and Jesus is missing. She's a young adolescent, preteen, 12 years old, some say. Jesus said, hey, don't you know I must be about my Father's business? to the cross, which was his purpose? What if she tried to control every moment of Jesus' life? But she learned a valuable lesson from the beginning. Not my will, but yours be done. Jesus showed the example in the garden. He didn't say, God, you better do what I want or I'm not going to go through with this. How many times do we pray like that? God, you better do exactly what I want or I'm not going to be faithful to you. We wouldn't say it that way. Most of the time we pray in tragedy and we get complacent in convenience. He says, whatever. Not my will, but yours be done. He said, if there's any way, take this cup from me, Jesus says in the garden as he prays. That's a far cry from the birth entry. From the cross to him committing spirit to the Lord. So when I see the accumulation of these things, I see that it's the ability to experience one of the most freeing moments in our lives. And the most incredible thing and freeing moments we could ever experience in our life, whether you are 90 today, whether you are 15 and all in between, or 8 or whatever the age is, one of the most freeing experiential things you can have in life is to let go and let God. Let go of what you cannot change and trust God. To respond with let it be. Because you don't always have the power to control, but you always have the power to surrender. And I've learned that God can do way more with my surrender than I can do with my control. In life, we will have every opportunity to decide whether we're going to control this moment or we're going to surrender in this moment. So for this season, what if surrender looked like? The apologies that needed to be made. The peace that the Lord would love to have in your house, but the resentment that you hang on to is much stronger. Or because you don't know what's going to happen next year. Instead of trusting in the Lord with all your heart, you're fearful. It's where we have an opportunity to let go and let God. Mary said, basically, whatever your will is, let it happen to me. From the messages that I've had the privilege to preach through the many Christmas seasons here at Celebration, the things that had to fall into line. Could you imagine if Mary was just trying to control that moment, that if she said, Lord, let it be, but then she went to Joseph and said, hey, you're going to hear something, but it's not true. I was down at the market, but I didn't mess with nobody, and nobody messed with me, but I am praying. I just know that, you're going to think it's crazy. Do you know that when you try to control something, you make a bigger mess than if you just let God have it and work his way through it? She didn't have to say a word to Joseph. Do you understand the vulnerability that she must have felt? To know that there's a really good chance that Joseph's going to walk away from her. Because not only could it have been a shameful moment for her, it definitely could be a shameful moment for him. For people to know that Mary is pregnant before they're even married. But then how embarrassing it must have seemed to everyone else in their minds if they tried to tell them the story. I'm telling you, God did this. They'd be like, they are crazy. Surrender looks crazy to people that don't live that way. Obedience doesn't make sense to the disobedient. Your life doesn't have to make sense to everybody else. You don't have to live at the expense of the applause of someone else or the culture. I think it's time. It is time for us to understand that it may cost us a little bit. Sure, Mary felt those things. She didn't know the end result that we are privileged to know by this story, by what we get to read from the account of the gospel. She didn't have the end result in place yet. But what did she have? She had a confidence that God did not bring her to that moment to let her fail. When you read through the whole story of the coming of Jesus, to the birth of Jesus, when you read the gospel account of it, how much of it truly would have made sense to you if you were that woman? Ladies. Guys, how much of it would have made sense to you if you were that husband? I mean, because if you were going to be a part of the great plan of God, shouldn't it be easy? Shouldn't it be convenient? Life will bring us an amount of challenge that we may never be prepared for because we don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know what next week holds. We don't know what's going to happen. But what we do know is this, that if we live surrendered, if I live surrendered and you live surrendered and you live obedient to the call of God on your life, guess what's going to happen? God's going to work it out. God's going to work it out. Well, people are trying to get me. They were trying to get them too. When you read on the story, it's an opportunity to live in surrender. What does surrender look like for you? And if that grips your heart in such a way, it should be the testimony in your life to who's really in control. There are things that I hope happen in my life, but if they never come to pass, I'm okay with it. When I back all the way up in my life to the beginning of the moment that I met Jesus, I can tell you that my life has been privileged much more than I could have ever dreamed for myself. I'm telling you that I've had experiences that I could have never dreamed big enough for myself. But I've also had heartache. I've also been let down. I've also been stabbed in the back. I've been betrayed. I've seen church people turn silly. But I wouldn't trade it for anything because I would rather be faithful and obedient to His call than to die at the criticism of people that didn't die for me and are not coming back for me. And that is where our control is truly placed. Where is our control? Where is it? Are we letting go and letting God? Surrender is a choice that we make. Then comes the idea of, well, Pastor, if I have the choice and I have the ability to choose. No, you don't have the ability to tell God what He's going to do, but what you do have the ability to do is surrender. Whatever it be, not my will, but yours be done, Jesus. I'm just going to surrender. I'm going to surrender. So my question for us would be, is it going to be full and 100% total surrender in our life? Or is there going to be partial surrender because some things we're not going to let go of? And the most freeing thing that can happen in our life today is that we let go and we let God. If you're able this morning, I want you to stand to your feet. I want to pray for you. This morning, I want April to join me. She's going to pray as we get ready to close this morning. I know that life is challenging. I know as a parent it's challenging. We have expectation and things that we hope happens, and when it doesn't, it just melts us. I want to live life in a way that no matter what happens, I just want to be faithful and obedient. I want to be surrendered to whatever He wants to do. What if the thing that you're controlling is putting the limit of the breakthrough in your life? If Mary had made the decision, and guess what? Mary had the opportunity to make the decision. You need to understand that. Mary had the opportunity to say, not me, Lord. Hey, find favor with somebody else. Because me and Joseph already got our wedding planned out. We already got our photographer. And I can't be bumping like that. They gonna know. And so you found some other idiot that ain't got all these plans, Lord. You let them have it. And I will celebrate them. I'm okay with you having your way in somebody else's life. I just got plans. I got plans. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it's the purpose of the Lord that prevails. I can promise you, the Lord will allow you all of the freedom to not live out destiny. But you need to return to the purpose of God in and on your life. May today you find that. Let go and let God. The not let me be, but Lord, let it be your will and not mine.
Let's pray together. Father, I pray, Lord, that you would begin now even to put a finger on that thing in our life that we hold so tightly, that we choose day in and day out to control. God, I pray right now, I want you people, I want you to ask the Lord right now, what's that thing in your life? What's that thing in your life that he is trying so desperately to have you surrender to so that he can take and do with it something that's far greater than you could ever see? Father, help us to surrender, Lord. Help us to not feel like we have to have control over every area. God, help us to see your word and see the life application that your word can bring to us. Lord, I pray that the power of the Holy Spirit in this place would begin to mold hearts, Lord, would begin to remove shackles, would begin to remove scales from people's eyes. I think that we are the last ones to see it. So Lord, help us to see that area of our life that we're not giving to you, the area of our life that we've swept to the side and said, okay, God, I got this one. I'm going to give you these other things. Lord, help us, God, to give everything in our life to you. And God, help us to trust you, because that's what it's really about. It's whether or not I trust you. And so, Father, today, with all of the people in this room, Lord, we proclaim that we trust you with every area of our life. Have your way, Lord. Have your way in our lives, Lord, as we surrender wholeheartedly to you in every area of our life. In Jesus' name.
It's
Amen.
the unfun things in our life that bring the most fruit. Whenever we walk through the valley of the shadow of death with the Lord himself, he will bring us from the valleys to the mountaintops and through the seasons of our life. May this be a season where we embrace the hope of Jesus, even when the hope of Jesus doesn't look like we thought it should look or feel like we thought it should felt. God's still in control, and he's going to work all things together for the good of those that love him and live according to his purpose. So what is our response? Surrender and obedience. Let's live that out, because that's what God blesses. May his face shine upon you, and may he bless you in your going and coming. May the Lord bless you today as you